I think we can get started. I'm going to introduce you to Akshay Kulkarni, who is our PM for automations. Akshay, if you'd like to.
Sure. Thanks, Ria. Thanks for introduction. Hey, hi everyone. Firstly, thanks for taking the time out of your day to come here and listen to us talk about this. But a little bit about myself. I've been with Atomicwork for a little more than 7 months now, and I take care of automations here, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So, pretty excited about it. So, the goal for today's talk is for me to, in general, talk about what are the main fundamental building blocks of an automation workflow building system. Uh, what are the key constructs that we need to know, and then we'll try to go through different use cases through which we can understand how easy it is to bring in these L2 types of automation within atomic work.
Yes.
uh,
Yeah, like you said, Akshay, excited about this because we always hear about automations, and even within the team, we just know that okay, usually it's our SEs or the customers who are just building it, but we can never really see what gets built out. And so yeah, very excited to see you do it hands on, see it working live. So yes, if you can just we can get started. And I know before we jump into use cases, you said you want to talk a little bit about the building blocks of automation. So if you can just tell us a little bit about what are the key things to keep in mind before you start building an automation, or what are some practical sort of like a set of steps that you can follow.
sure, that's a great question, and this is one place where I've seen people trip up many times when they're trying to build automations. It is I think the first step when you're trying to build an automation is to understand exactly what steps will be there as part of your process. So one thing I've seen that works out really well is if you can clearly define the use case of, okay, this is what I need to automate, and then you're able to break it down in steps. Building an automation for that, building a workflow that becomes much more easier, opposed to coming in with a very uh, non-clear view of what you need. Then like you sort of end up struggling with, okay, what is the right way to build this automation. Having said that, I think few fundamental things you need to think about when you're thinking of automation is, the first step to think about is, hey, when do you want this to run? That's the number one thing to think about. And you can have this construct in multiple ways. You can say, I need this to run when something happens in my system. So we call these event based workflows, and there's a wide range of events that we support. I'll show you the demo. So the first sort of thing is, okay, when some platform change happens, when some event comes into the work system, I need to run an automation. That's the first kind. The second kind is, we need some automation to run on a regular periodic basis. That's the second construct. So you might want something that runs every day, that runs every, like on a Monday every week. So that's what we call a scheduled workflow in our construct. So the first step is to figure out, okay, when do you even want this automation to run? As part of that, you should also figure out on what you want this to run. Like, is there a subset of requests you want this to run on? Is there, like, do you want it to run on all requests that are created? Do you want to run it only on certain types of requests? Once both of these are like crystal clear, the next step is to just define what the automation actually is. Like, do you want to send an email? Do you want to update the priority? Just writing it down on a paper as a flowchart is super helpful.
Mhm.
And do this by the end of this video, I'll show you something super cool where hopefully you won't even have to write it down on a piece of paper, but as long as you're clear with what you need, we'll be able to get to the automation.
Got it, Akshay. I think we can. I mean, I'm sure we can get into the nuances of you said filters and what triggers on what it is that it runs on. But before that, if you can just give us maybe one example each of like an event-based workflow and a scheduled workflow, just like an actual concrete. What would you run every Monday for an IT team?
Sure. So let's start with the event-based workflow, right? A simple use case for an event-based workflow would be that whenever a request comes in, you want to see what type of request it is. Like, might want to see if it's a request, if it's a service request or an incident raised about network issues or Wi-Fi or internet issues, and you might want to escalate this and give it more priority, because if employees in your company are not able to use internet, then that's a pretty bad thing. So you might want to listen for these specific types of queries and use that as the event trigger. And then as actions, you'd probably go update the priority of the ticket, assign it to a specific agent, assign it to a specific group.
Mhm.
That's an example of a event based workflow where you're essentially hooking it to the request creation event. Another category would be like a schedule where you might want to do some sort of a ticket cleanup. So I want to go clean up all requests which have been open for more than a month.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably, if the request has been open for a month and there's no activity on it, uh, it's been resolved in some form. So you can send out a response to the requester saying, "Hey, we're closing this because there's no response on this." But it just helps in maintaining that sanity and closing out these requests. Some additional things you can do on a schedule is like at the start of every month you can send out you can make sure you're cleaning up all the requests that are there. You can run a schedule and look at all requests where there is approvals pending and send a reminder to the people
Okay.
of, okay, hey, you need to approve this, it's pending on you.
Mm-hmm.
You can send reminders to agents where tickets assigned to them have been open for a long time, just as a nudge to say, hey, this ticket's been open for so many days, why don't you like sort of fix it.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. A lot of, yeah, like you said, maintaining sort of like sanity checks all through and making sure
Yeah.
that system is clean. We can, I think everything else, as you're showing, I'll have more questions on what you're doing, and we can get into the nitty-gritties of things. So
Sure.
get started with the first use case.
Let me share my screen. We can get into this. Let me know once you can see my screen.
Yes, your screen is visible, Akshay.
Yeah. So I'm in a test tenant of Atomicwork, and we'll be using this for doing all the like demo today.
Mhm.
So I'll first go to a workspace, and within the workspace, I'll open workflow. So this is where all the workflow automations are created. In each workspace, you can define a workflow specific to that workspace. So for all IT issues, I can create it in the IT workspace, and for HR related automations, I can create in the HR workspace as well. So we'll start with a very simple use case where, like I said, if a request is about network issues or Wi-Fi, we want to escalate the priority of it and then also respond back to the user and tell them that it's being looked into. It's a fairly straightforward use case, but it really helps us understand all the uh, underlying constructs
Mhm,
and the basics of how to build a workflow. So we'll start by clicking on create.
mhm.
I'll just close this because that's a surprise for later.
Uh-huh.
We'll start with a trigger, which I said is the first thing that you need to decide in a workflow is when does this workflow event or when does this automation event start. So I can click on add trigger, and here if you see there's two options like we discussed, event based and schedule based.
Mhm.
So I'll say okay, this is event based because I want this to run whenever a request is created, and I can also put in a condition that says the subject contains Wi-Fi or network, or I can also say description contains Wi-Fi or network. So we'll just make this or. So this essentially sets up our trigger of okay, look for whenever a request is created, check if the subject or description have the words Wi-Fi or network, and that's when you want to run this automation.
Got it.
Uh,
Akshay, just sorry to interrupt, and I'm just going to cut in here. This is, I forgot to mention this at the start of the webinar. This is for the audience that has joined us. You are free to ask questions at any time on anything that is being built live, or if you have any questions that you want us to pick up later. We will be keeping track of the questions that are coming in and making sure that we answer it as we go. Sorry for that interruption. Akshay, please continue.
so I think that was important. Yeah, please keep the questions coming. Okay, so now getting back into the workflow, we've set up the trigger, and this kind of defines when we want this automation to run. Another and now we can get into actions. I'll show you something interesting after I add the first action. So
Mhm.
like I said, the use case was that we wanted to update the priority of the ticket. So I can go into update attributes of a request. I can choose the priority, and I can make this urgent.
Mhm.
And
So
then
when you say update attributes, that is update any of the attributes that are associated with the ticket, right? Would that also include custom attributes or
yeah, so we've made this platform very extendable. So any sort of custom attributes you add will also show up here, and you can choose to uh, update those as well.
right? Got it.
Another interesting or thing that you might have noticed is for each of these actions, you can already see a description is being generated where it accurately defines what the action does. So if I can go into, like, let's say settings here, this one says no configuration because it was fairly straightforward.
Mhm.
But for the trigger one, if you see, this says triggers when request is updated by anyone for request with subject or description containing Wi-Fi or network, uh, which sort of describes what this action does. So one important and I think pretty cool capability that we have in our workflow builder is we take the pain of writing documentation away.
Mhm.
So let's just say we add more configuration here where we say subject, and I want to also, let's say, update the agent and make sure this is assigned to me. In
Right.
such cases, I can ask AI to generate a documentation for me, but it can also auto generate it when I save it. So this way, for when you come back to the workflow at a later point, it's readable and you can easily understand what the workflow does without actually having to go through every step.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think especially for, when you're a slightly bigger team and you have, say, multiple admins who are involved in workflow maintenance, and someone creates a workflow and then someone else comes in and they have to either tweak or, fix it, or something's gone wrong. Being able to just understand at a glance, what it is that you're looking at, I think that makes a vast difference in the amount of time it would take to sort of, just get started with like whatever the admin is there to do. So yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of our customers also agree with that. Uh, but just to close out this workflow, let's send a response to the requester from Atom, telling them that we have marked this as an urgent priority and will fix it ASAP and get back to you. So I just want to send out a response to the requester so they can be a little stress free. And if you see again, the description was auto generated where it says, we'll send a reply to the requester. This is the message that's going to go out. So all the documentation happens automatically. And once I'm ready and happy with the workflow, I can publish this.
Mhm.
And what you'll notice is it will also, there's a automatic version name that is generated. So we'll have like a V1, V2. And for each version, we also define what's new between like the previous version and the current version. In this case, there was no previous version, so it's just giving a description of what's happening. Where it says it activates a new request of Wi-Fi or network is created. It updates the request to urgent and assigns it to Akshay, and sends a reply assuring the urgent attention to the requester, which is perfect. It's a perfect definition of what this workflow does. I can save this.
So just a question, just a clarification here, Akshay. So when you say send a reply to the requester, we're talking about them receiving a reply in the channel that they originally reached out in, right? So if they'd like if they'd messaged Atom on Slack or Teams, they'd receive the reply there. But if it was email, they'd receive an email with this message. It
Yes, so we keep it consistent with the language where the request actually came in from.
got
Uh, and the response will actually go out on the same channel as well.
it, right?
So we'll just update the name of the workflow to say network issues priority bump. And again, if you notice, even here the description is auto generated, which
Mm-hmm.
explains what this workflow does, which is again great. Uh, and just to show you some more power within this workflow platform, let's just make a small change to the workflow where we'll also add a private note saying priority is increased and requester is being informed. And now when I publish this, if you notice, there's already a V2 that's generated because this is a new version on top of the older one. And when I go to publish, uh, Atom will generate a difference between what was previously there and what's currently there. So it says, okay, now you added a new private note to inform requester about the priority increase, and it does enhance communication by notifying internally as well when urgent requests are updated.
That is really cool.
So whenever you make changes to the workflow, one of the biggest concerns that we used to hear from customers was, what if I screw up? What if I accidentally change something?
Mhm.
And if someone else, like I went on vacation, someone else in my team changed the workflow. I don't know what changes they've made.
Mhm.
Uh, this addresses for all of that. Whenever a new version is published, it automatically generates a diff. It doesn't just generate a diff of what's changed, it also tries to encapsulate the value of why the change was made. So if you notice here, it says enhanced communication. So somebody who's coming in at a later point can read and understand why this change was made.
Got it.
And because there's versioning, they can go into the version history and see what the previous versions were. And if they don't agree with this, if they feel like, okay, this is not the right thing to do, they can always roll back to a previous version.
Got
They
it.
can just, and that becomes the latest version of the uh, workflow.
Got it. I think you just preemptively answered one of the questions that came in, which is, does versioning also capture who or which admin makes changes to the workflow? So, yeah, I think in version history,
Yes.
yeah,
So it shows you who made the changes and when the publish happened. One
got it.
thing to note is a version is only generated when it's published. Until then, it's a draft. But you will see if there's a current draft and who is working on the current draft.
Got it.
Okay, so I'm gonna discard the current draft. We'll keep it to this version.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's actually test this out. So we'll see how this workflow runs on a real request.
Yes.
So I'll go into Slack, which is where we'll start this, which is what we'll use as a channel to create requests. So I'm just gonna say I am facing network issues and can't use the internet on my work desktop. So presumably you'd be doing this from a phone.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, let's say you got into the office and you're not able to use your laptop or a desktop with the internet, and you can just then open up your phone, open Slack, and then talk to Atom. You don't have to wait for the IT person to come in, run to the IT desk, or find the right person. You can just message Atom. It gives you some troubleshooting tips to start with. So you could try the troubleshooting tips of saying maybe something's wrong in your setup. So it tries to help you that way, that can immediately answer your question. But let's just assume that I've done all of this and it's not working,
Right.
and I actually want to create an issue. So I can just click on that button. Here I can say, okay, and if you see, Atom tries to pre-fill a lot of this information. Let's just say network internet issue on work desktop, no Wi-Fi, and I'll just report this incident.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I think what one thing that people the problem is, yeah, when you can't access your laptop to make a request, how do
Yeah.
you with earlier systems, how do you figure out what portal you go to, where do you where do you go to raise a ticket, or all of those, like, it takes so much time just for employees to actually report the issues they are facing. Whereas here, like you mentioned, you just open your phone, open Slack, open Teams, go to Atom, you can message, and it's just right there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So once we come into the request, we'll notice that in the activity section, we can see the workflow that ran on this request. So
Mhm.
here we see Atom executed the workflow network issues priority bump,
Mhm.
which was the name of the workflow we had just created.
Right.
So it says, okay, the first step it did was it assigned the request to Akshay. It changed the priority from medium to urgent. So we can see that the priority was changed. And then it also changed the SLA from medium to urgent. There was some other workflow that ran, so we can ignore that for now.
Mhm.
And it also sent a reply to the requester. So if I go back into the chat, I can see that, sorry, yeah. So I can see that I've got a response which says we have marked this as an urgent priority and we'll fix this.
Mhm.
And we also added a private note on the conversation where it says priorities increased and requester has been informed.
Got it.
So this was an example of a simple workflow where you can use a trigger to run on specific conditions, and then update the request based on based on like whatever your use case was. Uh, with that, I will maybe stop sharing and we can see if there are any questions, and then we can go into the next one.
Sure. I think one question that I have is, if we have so how do you if there are multiple workflows, like over time, obviously this is over time, if there are multiple workflows that where you start adding sort of similar actions or similar conditions, like you're changing the priority, you're changing, maybe the triggers are also kind of similar,
Yeah,
right? How robust is the system that will be able to pick out these nuances, and how can you make sure that multiple workflows don't run on the same request? Or what are some sort of, how do I put this, clean recommendations that you might have on building workflows to avoid that issue?
good. That's a great question. So it's there can be multiple workflows that are defined, which can be coinciding with each other, and they might have interdependencies. And it's a really hard problem for us to know what's going to run and what will have a dependency with each other, because by definition workflow is very dynamic. So we don't it's just a definition, so we don't know what's the actual data that's going to come into the workflow. So it's important that we give the controls to the admins to
Mm-hmm.
decide how they want these workflows to run. So by default in Atomic Work, all workflows run in a sequence.
Okay.
They run one after the other. We don't run two workflows at the same time at any point. There is a setting where we can make sure like everything runs in parallel, but we don't recommend that
Mm-hmm.
because of the use cases that you mentioned. There can be interdependencies. So we always run them in sequence, and then we let admins control what that sequence is.
Got
So they can say, run this first, run this next, run this third, and that way they can define a sequence to make sure those interdependencies get sorted.
Got it. Yes. I think we have one more question that's come in, which is, Atom assumes the requester is on Windows and gives remedies. It should ask for variable if the user is on Windows or Mac and then provide suggestions. You can take this, or I can take this, because this is actually something cool that Atom does,
We can
right?
take it.
Got it. So yes, to answer that question, Atom actually has a lot of the user context and the asset context by default. So Atom is not assuming that the requester is on Windows. What it's doing is it will, based on the amount of, based on the apps that you have connected to your Atomic Work tenant, as well as just based on the system information that is available to Atom. Atom can detect whether you are on Windows or Mac, and it provides suggestions according to that. So, and the suggestions that it's providing, it's pulling this from trusted knowledge sources, which is, so it'll be public Windows documentation or public Mac documentation, or the Stack Overflow questions, which have resolved this issue previously. So it is all trusted sources, and it already knows what as device or asset you're on, which is why it is tailoring the suggestions there. Anything you'd like to add to that, Akshay?
No, I would say firstly, great noticing that it was a Windows thing. But like Ria mentioned, Atom gets context of what asset is mapped to that user in that particular tenant, and it uses that information to figure out what sort of troubleshooting to give. And it also depends on what knowledge is turned on in a tenant. So
Mm-hmm.
if you turned on like a Windows support as the knowledge source, that would it would primarily just use that. But if you turn on both Apple support and Windows support, it would then go look at, okay, what asset is mapped to this actual user, and
Mm-hmm.
then use that for figuring out.
Yes. I hope that answers the question. There doesn't seem to be anything else, so we can move on and keep going. And to the audience, yes, please keep the questions coming.
Time check, we're at 29 minutes, so maybe I'll do a more interesting use case now. So, okay, before I jump into sharing my screen, I'll probably lay this out as a use case. So, what we saw now was a very basic set of actions, but there are some times where it's not as simple as looking at a subject and description and figuring out. That's sort of like, to be honest, that's boring. Uh, but there can be use cases where you want to actually interpret the message in some form and understand what the user is trying to say,
Mm-hmm.
and not rely just on keywords. A good example of this is, let's say you want to understand if a user is frustrated.
Mhm.
And while you can do it via keywords, you can say, okay, search for bad, annoyed, sad, these sort of keywords, but that's never going to be complete. You want it to be more intuitive, and you want Atom to be more intuitive about what the user is saying. So
Mhm.
we have built in AI actions which can actually classify what the user is trying to say, or any sort of message. It's not specific to the requester's message, and then create some classification on top of that, and you can use that in the workflow. So what we'll do now is we'll try to build like a scheduled workflow
Mhm.
that runs on requests, that runs every day, looks at all the requests that have been open for more than X number of days, go back and see the last reply that the requester gave on that, sort of
Mhm.
like the last message the requester gave, and then we'll use AI classification to see if the user is annoyed.
Mhm.
Annoyed, we'll maybe bump up the priority again
Got
and
it.
assign to a specific, like a team lead who can then go address that issue.
So a form of sentiment analysis, really, just to understand. Yeah.
But the cool thing about this is, while in this use case we're using it for sentiment, you can literally uh, build that classification to be around anything. It can be around sentiment, it can be around categories as well. So you can, instead of saying look for the words Wi-Fi and network, you can just create categories of, okay, network issues,
Mm-hmm.
hardware, software issues, and then ask Adam to say, okay, let's just look at the message and tell me what type of issue the user is talking about. So it's extendable to any sort of classification.
Got it.
So let's share my screen. That's actually cool. Let's do that. Let's put a classification for both the type of issue and as well as the
Category. Yeah.
the sentiment of the user.
Mm-hmm.
So within workflows, we'll go into schedule based because we want to create a workflow that runs on a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
We'll create, close this out, add trigger, and now we'll choose schedule based as an option. Let's say we want this to run every day at 9 a.m. Pacific. I'll just use that as my schedule for when this needs to run. And I let's say one thing you want to make sure when you're building schedule based workflows is to figure out not just the frequency that this runs on, but also how many times you want it to run on like the same request.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I set this to like send a response or nudge an agent, I probably don't want to do that every morning. I probably want to nudge them once and then close the request the next time. So
Mm-hmm.
in this, I will say do not run this again on the same object. That's the default option. But if you want this to actually run every day, you can just uncheck this, and that will be gone. But for now, for testing, I'll just keep this on. And like I said, we want to run this on all requests that have been that are still in pending,
Mm-hmm.
and they were created, let's say, more than 3 days ago. So it's been 3 days since they've created. Uh, it's been at least 3 days since they've been created, and the status is still open,
Mm-hmm.
uh, not resolved. We want to run the schedule workflow on all of them. So I can just save this trigger. And on these, now I want to use the AI classification. So I can use this action, which is classify content with AI.
Mm-hmm.
And here the text to classify, I would say, is the request description. And we'll create category of network issues. The issue that the user is describing is about network issues. It's about network and internet access. And I can also create an other category called hardware issues. And the issue that the user is describing is about hardware or device. So instead of relying on keywords, I can actually create these categories and then the use the AI classification to sort of figure out what. And the cool thing is I can also test
Mm-hmm.
how this would work. So if I can say something like my mouse is not working, I'll add another one where I can unable to message anyone email, or I can also add not able to open any website. So if you see, these ones would have failed in our previous classification because they neither have the word Wi-Fi or the network.
Mm-hmm.
Because we built this as a classifier, now we can pass these messages the AI classification node, and it can figure out what the issue is. So if you see, it says my mouse is not working is a hardware issue. Unable to message anyone on email is a network issue, and not able to open any website is also a network issue.
That is really cool. So it is just picking based on the intent of what the user has said, right? Even though they haven't really used any of the words that
Correct.
we. So I do want to clarify one thing here, especially when you're setting up the classification. How detailed does the sort of the instruction that you give in terms of like for the category of the description, does it need to, do you need to go into too much of detail, or just sort of a high level, just an instruction to Atom being like, okay, this has to be approximately what it's about, and Atom will be able to take it from there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be very detailed as long as you can give a one-line description of what it is.
Hmm.
Atom is able to understand. That's because we do a lot of processing in the backend to actually expand the description and understand what the category is.
Hmm.
But as an admin, you don't have to like give like a 10-line description. As long as you can clearly describe what this category is, like in a single line or two lines, that's good enough.
Got it. But does it help to maybe add, does it, or does it make a difference if you add any keywords? Like it might not be relevant with categories, because this, I think, even with the test sample inputs that you've shown
Yeah.
is very clear. But say you were talking about sentiment, right? And sentiment is such a sort of an iffy place to work in.
Yeah.
Would it be better to sort of use keywords? So say that, okay, if they say this, or does that help, or is it not necessary at all?
It doesn't like it helps it in a way that can classify those things better, but I would say it's unnecessary.
Hmm.
But in cases it might backfire where it only starts looking for those keywords because you've explicitly asked it to look for those.
Ah, okay.
I would recommend against that unless your use case is to actually look for those keywords exactly. And rather, I would recommend that we keep it more open ended and just explain what the category needs to be.
Got it. Makes
So
sense.
we'll just save this, and let's just say we'll now we the cool thing about the workflow builder is we can also build conditional logic into the workflow itself. So here we can say we only want to proceed and run this workflow if the previous action output, which is classify content with AI, the category that was identified was a network issue. So if you see, you can use any of the outputs from a previous action and then use that further in the logic, and you can also run conditions based on that.
Got it. That is actually very quite powerful, right? Being able to use the output of previous actions to define where the workflow goes. And I assume that extends to any action that has been taken previously in the workflow. So if you had a workflow with, say, 5 or 6 steps, and
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, it works on all of them.
Got it.
Yeah. So let's say if it was about a network issue, we again want to do the same thing, but
Mhm.
we also want to see if the user sentiment is what the user sentiment is. So I can again add a AI classification node. I'll say instead of just looking at the request description, we will look at the last reply,
Got it.
and we'll say user is, I'll create one category called annoyed, where the message from the user clearly denotes that they are unhappy, annoyed. Another category we will create is neutral. The response from the user indicates that they have a neutral sentiment. one interesting thing we can try out is we can say also keep in mind that users could be sarcastic.
Ah, yeah, I think sarcasm is always one of those, is a very difficult thing to really define. Ah,
Yeah. So here, if you notice, it's saying they are very similar categories because I've not given a very good description on both. They
mhm,
both pertain to broader theme of sentiment despite representing different emotional states. So in this case, what it's telling me is, hey, you're already doing annoyed, but this is just like a different version of it, like it's an anti version of it.
mhm,
So instead of creating two, we can just remove that. And there's a chance that you can misclassify it when you do it this way. But we'll, for now, let's say it's just a warning. We can double check it. I know that I've said it's neutral and here it's annoyed.
mhm.
That's okay. Uh, we'll say ignore and continue. And now we'll test it. Well, we'll say something like, that's all right. I will wait till this is fixed. I'm like, oh man, how can I work without internet? So frustrating. Yeah, yeah, sure. I will just sit around and drink coffee all day, I guess. So we'll test this. I'd be really surprised if it gets a sarcasm because sometimes humans miss it.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I think. Oh, wow. That is very
Yeah,
impressive.
yes, taking over humans.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you see, it also gives a description of why it feels this is annoyed, and it's saying
Mhm.
the message contains clear sarcasm and passive aggressive tone. Wow, if humans were so
Yeah. Wow.
good
Mhm.
good at understanding sarcasm, that would be great, indicating annoyance with situation. So again, if you see, it's able to understand the sentiment, and this goes beyond like a very base level sort of sentiment classifier,
Mhm.
and it's able to very clearly understand sarcasm as well.
Yeah, I feel like this is the kind of AI that we should have equipped Sheldon Cooper with. Would have helped him greatly.
Okay, so now I can say if the user is annoyed, I want to maybe do something. If they're okay, I don't want to update it to a lot. So I can again use, if I go into previous action outputs, you'll see that there's two classify content with AI because we've used it twice in this workflow before.
Mm-hmm.
So I need the second one, so I can go into categories and I can say annoyed. So if the user is annoyed, I will bump up the priority to urgent.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're not annoyed, it's still okay. So I'll maybe not bump it to urgent, but I'll keep it as high. So this is an example of how you can use AI-based classification to determine the intents or sentiment of what the user is saying, and
Mm-hmm.
then actions based on that. Uh, we'll extend this use case slightly more to look at some other interesting concepts in the workflow builder. Like if you remember, this condition was to check for whether it's a network issue.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say it wasn't a network issue and it was actually a hardware issue. So I can just put another condition here that says the category of issue was hardware issue.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, maybe we just want to give them a new device. But before we do that, we'll probably have to get an approval from the manager. So we have a inbuilt action for doing that. So you can get approvals through the automation itself. So I can say send for approval, and uh, I want to add specific approvers for this. There's two options. You decide to send for approval. You can have pre-built policies where You can decide who the approver is. Like for a device, I think we have a default policy that says requester manager is a sole approver, and we can also have multiple approvers on a when things. So, for example, let's just say let's just go into the holiday approval. I can add requesters manager and requester HRBP, for example. Actually, let's just go do that for the device policy, which is what we're doing. So let's just say the requesters manager and requesters HRBP. Uh, Both of them need to approve for a new device. So I can do that as my policy, and I can say, okay, apply this policy and send it out for approval. And once it's approved, just send a reply to the requester saying sorry for the inconvenience. You can submit a new device from the IT desk. So one issue we used to see a lot of our customers face is when they do approvals or when they take actions on sort of like variables like requesters manager, requester HRBP.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes relationships might not be defined in the system. Like my HRBP in the uh, might not be defined in the account, or there was some issue and the HRBP left and it was never updated. Those sort of issues can happen, and then the workflow fails because of that. And there can be other actions later in the workflow which you want to run regardless of what's happening here, but because it failed, you will not be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or any cases where you're like, okay, that failed, that's okay. I'll just update the data, make sure it's there, and we'll make it work. Even those cases, there was an issue. So in such cases, what we've now sort of given a control on is you can set something to look for failure and uh, basically either stop the workflow or run the workflow or continue the workflow at that point. So if I go to any action, sorry, one second. Uh, Yeah. If you go into any action, you can say if there's an error at this point, you either want to stop the workflow and make sure none of the next steps run, and you'll run it from this point on at a later once you fix the issue, or you can say uh, you continue the workflow regardless of this failing, and this sort of gives the admins control of how important this step is in the workflow itself. So let's
Got
just say I wanted to send an email uh, from Atom to the requesters HRBP and requesters manager saying has raised issue with their device, sending an approval request device. So I was going to email to the managing HRBP, but I this is okay for me if this fails. I just wanted to go ahead and do its thing. I can just say, okay, continue the workflow even if this like email action fails.
got it. So I do have a couple of questions here while you're building the rest of this. So the HRPP details, we do pull in a lot of this information from sort of connected apps, right? So if it's
Yes.
connected to either Okta, any of their IDPs, or say they have a HR app like Rippling, it will pick up that information from those apps, right?
Correct. Correct. But it could be possible that it's not defined even in that.
In
Uh,
the original app. Got it. I
yes.
think the other question that has come up in the chat, and maybe we can touch on this a little later as well, is whether workflows can be run only on requests or on change records as well. Which, if,
Uh, they can be run on change as well. I'll show you how that works. It's actually exactly the same. but it can run on change as well. It can run on all requests. It can run on requests. It can run on incidents. It can run on change. No issues.
Got it. So any kind of request or ticket that really comes into the system.
Correct.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just making some change. Uh, just so we can test this, I will remove the condition of request being created more than 3 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to
Yeah,
go back to time.
of course. Be amazing if you could do that, but yeah.
Yeah. So I've scheduled this to run in like maybe few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Publish this workflow. And we'll just create a request from the portal for each demo. I'll just make it a hardware request this time. I'll say my mouse is broken. Can see the cursor, but when I move the mouse, not doing anything. I am not great at keyboard shortcuts. Okay, we'll just create that request. We'll keep it handy and we'll come back to this in some time. So hopefully the schedule workflow picks it up.
Yes. And I think we can probably answer this question once the workflow runs, but I do want to clarify whether, if a workflow fails at a particular step, is that is that visible somewhere as a log? So admins understand or agents know that, okay, the workflow failed here for this particular step.
Yeah. Ideally, I think the way we set this up, this workflow should fail
Mm-hmm.
because in the current account, I've manually gone and removed the HRBP map to me. So there's no HRBP map to me at all. So when it tries to send an email, it won't find an HRBP and that should fail. And I'll be able to demo
Yeah,
what happened.
we'll
in
see
a-
that then. So yes, while we wait for that, I don't think any other questions have come in here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so there's one other clarification, which is, so in terms of this error handling, how granular is it? So it is essentially you can define sort of this error action per action in a workflow, right? It's not a global setting for the workflow, or it's not just if the whole workflow fails.
Correct. And there's a reason for that because within the same workflow, you can decide that few steps are okay to fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. You don't want to break, like, a workflow in the end is a business process,
Mm-hmm.
and some steps are optional in a way. Like, it's okay if the email doesn't go to the manager as long as the approval goes out to them, for
Got it.
example. So you might say it's okay if the email fails, but there's no way I want the approval to fail. Like, if the
Right.
approval stop the workflow,
Got
I'll
it.
go
Because
fix it.
yeah, because they'll probably receive the approval notification elsewhere, right? So they might see it on Slack or Teams, and they can just approve from
Right.
there. But yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. That's the
Um.
reason we keep it at an action level.
Mhm.
One second, sorry. Yeah. Uh, okay. So while that runs, maybe
Yeah.
what we'll do next is look at the third big piece of a workflow automation.
Mhm.
Uh, so far, what we've seen is how we can use AI, how we can use actions within the platform, and how we can make changes within the platform. But that's not the reality of most of the workflows. Most of the times, you want to run an automation where an external system is involved.
Mhm.
So you either want to make API calls to an external system, or you want to use some actions and perform actions in an external system.
Mhm.
So it could be an example where you want to reset somebody's Okta password.
Mhm.
A user has reached out that, hey, they're not able to log into the system and they've forgotten the password, and you might want to reset the password when such a request comes in. So it's important that you're able to connect and take actions on these external systems. So we'll see an example of that.
Got
We'll also see an example of how you can make an API call, which sort of gives you unlimited flexibility to integrate with any system.
it. Mhm.
We have pre-built integrations with close to 50 apps at this point,
Mhm.
but and that catalog is expanding. But there'll always be more apps out there. We know that, which is why we have the capability to make any API call through a single action,
Mhm.
and you can actually use the responses. So we'll see an example of that as well.
Got
And
it.
finally, while we might have an integration with a certain system, the APIs itself or the actions might be limited in terms of what we provide versus what an admin wants to automate.
Mhm.
Or they might want to use it in like different ways and new ways.
Mm-hmm.
So in some cases, we allow them to write code, which gives ultimate flexibility on what they want to do. And
Mm-hmm.
within the code, uh, just to make it useful and easy for them to use these external actions, we expose all of that as a code library. So they don't have to worry about writing like base level constructs, and
Okay.
they can use the library itself. So I'll just share my screen and get into such a workflow.
Yes.
Uh, I'll go into settings, flows, and just in interest of time, because I want to show multiple things, I'll keep the use case sort of free flowing and
Mm-hmm.
try to build multiple use cases into the same thing. So let's just say the trigger is the request is created, and it's a service request for someone asking for an Okta reset. Sorry, I want to use service form. Service category is security and network access, and service form is a Okta password reset.
Got it.
So this is the case where a user is requesting for an Okta password reset.
Mm-hmm.
And as an admin, you can take a simple action of okay resetting the password. So if you notice in our workflow builder, we have this section called external actions, and you can see all the apps that are connected. You can find more more apps in the app store itself. So I'll just open that in a new page. If you go into App Store, there's multiple apps and there's more coming soon
Mm-hmm.
as well. But once you connect an app, you will start seeing it in the workflow builder, and you can see what actions are there within. So in this case, our use case is to just reset the Okta password. So I can go into Okta. There's a lot of pre-built actions here, and there's one action which I can use, which is generate reset password link,
Mm-hmm.
and decide who the user is. So I just want to do it for the requester, and once this is done, I can send them a reply saying reset password link has been shared on your email, and we can also send it to them here itself.
Mm-hmm.
If you are unable to access your email, you can reset by clicking here, and this will actually send them the password reset URL. So this is an example where we have a pre-built action, and that can be directly used to send sort of to take sort of the action. But there can be cases where, let's say, it's not a pre-built action. There's no action to perform that use case.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an option to use a webhook. So let's just say when such requests come in for password reset, I also want to uh, sort of assign it to a agent to help them if there are any MFA resets that also need to be performed.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I can search for like business hours, but obviously there's no pre-built action. But this is where the action for calling APIs really helps. So I can go into this action. Uh, I've got the URL for making uh, this API call, and then we also need to add the credentials. So in this case, I need to add credentials of this account itself. I'll just grab that.
So I think one question here is, for these API based actions for the webhooks,
Yeah.
what authentication methods do we support, and how are the credentials stored securely?
Yeah. So the credentials are stored in a separate section called security here, and
Mm-hmm.
they're only accessible to account admins.
Okay.
Uh, and within the workflow, if you see the credential itself is not exposed, but it's selectable. So if you're an account admin, you'll be able to store these credentials in the security vault. and make it available for workspace admins to configure, but the workspace admin themselves can't actually see the credential.
What the key? Okay, got it.
Yeah. So because I'm an account admin on this account, I can do it. So I can
Mm-hmm.
just say this is the Atomic Work API key. And if you see, I think there was a question about authentication methods. So we have username, password, which is basic auth, and API key. We are also adding OAuth as a credential storing method.
Mm-hmm.
That will come in later.
Got it.
I can say API key. I can put my key in here. I can add that. So once I've added the credential, like from a workspace admin standpoint, all they can see is that there's some Atomic Work API key that's created,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't actually see the key.
What the key is, right?
Okay. So if I test it, I can see what the output of the API call is. I can see that it's fetching some business hours for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can use this later in the workflow as well.
So that is a fairly powerful capability here, right? The fact that we can use, so can we translate these values into, say, custom fields on a request? And essentially, we can use any of these output values as part of conditions or in later steps in the workflow, right?
Correct. So everything you notice, which is created as a pill here, is available in next outputs. Uh, so if I left just for say demonstration, we can say add a private note inside placeholder, and I can go into previous actions and I see the create webhook action,
Right, right.
and all of the
See,
keys that are created there, I can see them here and I can use them.
got
But in the cases where I actually want to use the response body, which is a JSON, and I want to do some sort of complex logic on it,
it.
I
Mhm.
can just use the response body as well.
Right.
In fact, to show the power of this, let's actually do that. So let's say now I've gotten the list of business hours, but I want to use the business hours to understand if the current request is created within those business hours. If yes, I want to give it to someone. If not, maybe I want to assign to someone else. Right. So to do any such logic, I can use our execute code block, and I can actually put code scripts within this. So it's fairly complex, but I have the code ready, so I can just copy that. Sorry. So what this code is doing is it's going through the input response, like the response data that it's come in, finding the business hours, and based on the business hours, it's in the end returning whether the request creation was in business hours or out of business hours,
Got it.
right? So it looks at when the request was created as well as what the business hours currently are configured.
Mhm.
So we need to configure both of those inputs to go to this code. So I can say response data, and here I want to pass in the response body that came in from previous action. And I also wanted to use the created at, just to make sure I'm passing the right thing. Yeah, so it's created at.
Mhm.
And here I can say request created at. I want to pass this state. So I can do that. And I can test this code with some sample data as well. And
Mhm.
then this essentially does the business logic routing. So in the end, it returns whether this is in business hours or out of business hours. And I can use that sort of logic to test
Got
the right.
Just a couple of questions there while you're setting up the rest of it. So one
Yeah.
is errors inside the. You can keep setting up the workflow, Akshay, if you need to. But the question was how errors inside these custom codes that you're creating, right? How do you deal
Yes.
with those? Are there logs? Are there traces?
So when you run this in a workflow, like I showed the previous time where we were seeing it in activities,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in the activities it shows up as a failure, and you can actually see what's happening. So I think here we noticed that the workflow that we had set up
Right, the
was
one for whether the with the classify with AI defining whether it's what kind of
yeah,
category. Yes,
correct. And if you see, then other workflow ran, which is actually a good example for us to look at the continuum error. So if there was an error in a certain group, it will give you this logic of continuum error. So this
mm-hmm.
was a case where the workflow was set up to continue even if there was a failure on that.
Right.
Yeah. Workflow one is what we created, right?
Yes.
So here we can see that it classified the content with AI.
Mm-hmm.
And if you notice, we can view logs for each action, and we can sort of see what went in.
Okay.
So here, if you see the classify content with AI, the output was that it's a hardware issue, and there is the reasoning of the user describing a problem with their mouse not functioning, which is clearly a hardware-related issue. So that's
Right.
how the LLM is reasoning and understanding what the user is saying.
Mm-hmm.
So and then filters where the previous output contains network issues, so that's false. So it's essentially not gone this path because there's not a network issue and it's come down this path. I think what was it? I'm just checking. Oh, I think there was some mistake in the configuration we made here. Oh, we had not selected hardware issues. My bad.
So in this case, it would still run. It's just that it wouldn't. It is
Yeah,
not restricting it to that specific category of the request.
correct. So it decided that that was not the right step, so it said false,
Mhm.
uh, which essentially took it down the negative path of this here,
Right.
and we
And
didn't
it.
really have that configured here, so it didn't do anything. So now that we fix it, we'll just make this run like in next minute. Let's just be safe and give it 2 minutes from now. Yeah. Okay. Just coming back to the workspace itself,
Mhm.
sorry, the workflow itself. I do want to also show another capability where you can use actions from third parties as libraries itself. So,
Mhm.
an example could be that I want to raise a PTO request and I want to make sure I'm able to plug into Workday, get the
Mhm.
eligible leave types,
Mhm.
iterate them, and then use the IDs of these leave types at a later point. It's a fairly complex use case where you have to loop through things, have some conditional logic, and then based on that, make some decisions. And a simple workflow action might not suffice. So, in
Mhm.
such cases, what we've done is I'll just remove this code. We've exposed all of these external actions also as libraries within the code builder itself.
Mhm.
So you can do something like workflow dot and workday, and then everything that you can do in workday is available here. So I can say workday apply leave, and then it gives you what all parameters need to be passed. So I'll just show you an example of how this code will work. So we have example here. Just bring that in. So what this is doing is I've hard coded a worker ID for now, just so we can test this easily.
Mhm.
Uh, it's using the library functions that we have with Workday to actually plug into that system and get the data out. So we can start seeing it with an example of where maybe first we just get the worker details
Mhm.
and we can run a test on this code.
So when you say the library of actions here that you're seeing is part of the code actions, this is the default actions that are available within our system. But the idea is that with execute script, execute code itself, you can extend it to any API that Workday might have exposed from their end.
Correct. So that's a new capability that we are building that's currently not in the platform,
Mhm.
but that will allow you to extend to any API call. But with what I'm showing you right now, you'll be able to call the existing APIs, but then use the response data
From
more freely,
yes.
because while we can give out some sort of labels, in many cases you'll want to use the entire sort of JSON body and
Hmm.
run some custom logic on top of that.
Got it.
So here, if you see, I did the get user details API call, and it's giving me all the location details.
Hmm.
Maybe there's a code. Maybe I need to write some code to see, get the location description, update, make another API call based on that. So those sort of complex use cases can be done.
Hmm.
In fact, maybe a better example of that will be, instead of looking at the worker details, let's say we want to look at all the leave types that are available to this user.
Hmm.
I'll just print out the worker leave types. We'll run the test again. Increase readability. Let me do that. Yeah. So now, if you notice, we have a worker leave type data,
Mhm.
and giving you a list of all leave types that the user is eligible for, like a bereavement time off, uh, and they have some RS bereavement time off,
Mhm.
vacation time off.
Right,
So
right.
this gives you essentially a list of things, and now you might want to go through each of these iteratively, take action based on that, store these IDs, or do something else. So all of that is possible because of code. Without the flexibility of code, that would be very hard for you to sort of build everything in a drag and drop builder. So this essentially makes it very extensible in terms of what you can do with the workflow builder itself.
Got it. I think one clarifying question here is in terms of like writing code, what languages or runtimes are supported, and are there any limits? So in terms of either memory or time that admins should be aware of.
So all we only support JavaScript right
Mm-hmm.
now. That's fairly popular language, and most people are comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no limits, hard limits as such on memory. Sorry, there's no hard limits as such on memory and time at this
Uh-huh.
point. But obviously, reasonable sort of limits exist in terms of how long this process can be.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't want people to like write like infinite loops. So there's timeouts that happen. I
Mm-hmm.
think the timeout is currently set to 60 seconds, so you can't run this for more than 60 seconds. But you'll for the uses of the workflow that really doesn't apply.
Got
The other sort of limitation to keep in mind is because it is running in like a constrained environment, you will not have access to all the libraries out there,
it.
but
Mm-hmm.
all the standard libraries of JavaScript will be available. But if you're using some custom library, that will not be available within the code script itself.
Got
In such cases, what we recommend is you expose that as an API from an external system, and we're able to make that API call.
it. Right. Got it.
Okay, so that was code actions. But just to complete our previous use case, let's go back into the request for schedule one because I want to show you the error path. Okay, it seems like it hasn't run yet, which is weird.
It's always a trial by fire trying to run scheduled workflows live, isn't it?
Running schedule workflows is a challenge.
Yeah.
Let's make sure the trigger every day at 19:38.
Is it
That's
because is it
oh yeah,
because
I know
yeah.
because we said we want the workload to run only once. So
Yeah.
let's just remove that and make it. Are we overtime?
We are, but that's okay. I think I mean, all of this is interesting enough to cover, and hopefully the audience thinks so too. We can extend for a little while longer, but we'll stop boring them soon enough.
We've given like 2 minutes, so I think we can use that to show something exciting and very cool that we're working on.
Yes.
Yes, I think I really enjoy building these workflows
Hmm.
because it gives you control on drag on creating a business process and then mapping it out. But like I mentioned, the first step is to actually map the business process out and understand like how the steps are laid out, and then actually build them one by one.
Hmm.
We're trying to shorten the time that you take for that by bringing in Atom to help you
Hmm.
build workflows, which is where you see in the new section we have this new Ask Atom section that opens up in the workflows.
Hmm.
This is currently in like private testing internally, but
Hmm.
we'll soon be opening it up for all our customers. So now instead of trying to map out the business process myself, trying to understand what the steps should be, I can just tell Atom what workflow I want to automate. So let's just take the same use case that we started with which was if user requests about network issues, then network or Wi-Fi issues, then see if they are also very frustrated. If they are frustrated, make it urgent priority. If not, make it high. In both cases, assign the request to. I'll just put my email. Now I don't have to think about what the trigger needs to be, what the steps are, what steps do I need to use AI, do I need to use subject or Wi-Fi or
Mhm.
description, and I can just ask Atom to help me figure out how to build this automation. The cool thing here is we've built a reasoning sort of loop into Atom here. So Atom not just understands and starts building the workflow, but it actually tries to think about the use case itself. And if you see, it's trying to think of, okay, what is the best sort of trigger to use,
Mhm.
which is, if you remember back to the time we started this webinar, we said that's the first thing you think about. Okay, what is the trigger for me? And that's exactly the step that Adam is also doing, which is, okay, figuring out what the trigger is. So it's saying trigger is when request is created, which is right. And now it notices that there are some custom fields. For it, everything is a custom field. So it's looking at what fields in the request needs to be looked at and what actions need to be looked at. So it's gonna go ahead and create a plan of what it thinks this workflow should be, and will give us sort of the plan laid out, saying, okay, this is the request trigger, this is the trigger for the workflow, these are the actions that we need to take, and you can give it feedback on the plan itself. And if you're happy with that plan, you can say, yeah, go ahead and build this workflow.
This is actually very exciting because I think, like you mentioned, I'm sure a lot of IT folks or maybe folks in engineering, are used to building out workflows that involve like heavy code, and they can really go into the details. But for a lot of other teams, and because Atomic Work is a platform that can extend to any sort of enterprise service team, so maybe your HR
Yeah.
teams, your marketing teams, your sales teams, if they're building out these workflows, uh, to set up services that other employees can use it, this would be really helpful because they, even though all of us work with sort of different automation tools at different points, being able to sort of take away that stress of, oh, okay, what exactly am I supposed to be building here?
Yep. Okay. That's true. I think it really makes this process more collaborative,
Hmm.
and you can collaborate with Atom to build it and not work in isolation, and also helps you make sure you're doing the right thing.
Right.
Because all the right sort of practices are built into Atom at this point. So if you see, it's saying the trigger is when a request is created and the subject contains network or Wi-Fi.
Hmm.
And it's saying the first step is it will analyze if the user is frustrated by classifying content using AI. Then if user is frustrated, it will set the priority to urgent and assign to Akshay. If false, it will set the priority to high and assign to Akshay, which is exactly what we want.
Right.
So we can say, yeah, go ahead and build this workflow.
And it is really cool to see this in action because I know we've talked about, like, as like we've been talking about workflow and bringing in more AI as part of sort of automation in the system. So to see it just really, you've built, like, the time it took us to go through, say, 10-15 minutes to build out that initial workflow, you've gotten
Yeah.
it done in like 2 minutes, which is a massive sort of time
Yeah.
save, right?
And I think
Yeah.
about it took 10 minutes, and I've been doing this for a while.
True,
Uh,
yeah. Like I would have taken that first use case and it would have taken me, say, anywhere between like 1 to 2 hours. So yeah, big help for admins and agents who are setting up systems and trying to improve processes, right?
yeah. Now you can just chat with Adam, tell it what it needs to do. Go for a walk, come back. It will have a plan ready for you,
Hmm.
and then you can just ask if review the plan. If it feels like it makes sense, you can just ask it to build it, and then watch Atom do the work, and you can just review Atom's work at the end of it. You don't have to do any work yourself.
Really cool. Like one of the coolest uses of AI, I think, apart from all the sort of coding things that we've been seeing out there.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of the best practices that we want people building workflows to do is baked into Atom. So not only does it build a workflow, if you see it's saying it's validating the workflow. So it'll look at the flow, it'll try to correct itself. I think all of us, when we were kids, we were told to review our answers in the
Mhm.
exam. I don't know how many of us actually did, but Atom is very diligent. It always reviews its own work. And then it goes into like it first verifies if the entire graph or the flow is accurate, and then it'll go into each step, validate if that's the right step to do. And then once it's happy, it will deploy that workflow. So if you see, it's already built that workflow for me.
Mhm.
So it's looking at request is created, subject contains network issues, network or Wi-Fi. It's classifying content with AI. It's actually created 4 categories, which is more than what we had. So it's looked at high, moderate, low, and no frustration. Then it's checking if the frustration, based on frustration, that categories that it found. So it's saying if it's high or moderate,
Mhm.
it's going to set the priority. Sorry, if it's yes, if it's high or uh, moderate, it's going to set the priority to urgent and assign it to me. If not, it's going to set it to high and assign it to me, which is what we had asked it to do.
Right. And you
And
can just come in and you can either, edit the steps yourself, or like you said, you can just chat with Atom to have it correct steps on the fly, right? I mean, as you're building it.
correct. And I didn't build any step in this. I just gave it the use case, and Atom built the entire workflow for me, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, it definitely is phenomenal, and I think once this goes out, it'd be very interesting to watch people sort of play around with this and sort of. I think it really opens up the kind of use cases that you can think about automating. Like maybe earlier, the constraint was that, oh, this would, like, maintenance, or just in terms of creating a workflow itself, the amount of time it would have taken, right? Very excited to see this out. Uh, Hoping our customers will are excited to try it too.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I'm super excited to see how our customers use it and what they build. Uh, but yeah, coming back to the previous workflow, the schedule one.
Yes.
Uh, if you remember, we had a step where it was sending an email, and we were okay with that failing,
Hmm.
but it's okay. But there's the other step which was sent for approval, which we didn't want it. We didn't want it to continue post that, and we wanted to explicitly fail at that step if it cannot find the right inputs. So if you notice here, it says send for approval has failed. I can go into the logs. You can see why it's failed. It's saying it's some reference issue, and if I go into the message, it says request as HRVP does not exist,
Hmm.
which is something I had manually removed from my profile.
Right.
But uh, within this, if you see, there's a button, there's a CTA called retry,
Hmm.
which allows me essentially to retry the workflow from this failure point instead of trying to run the entire thing. So before I do a retry, let me fix the data issue itself. I can make sure I actually have a HRVP assigned to me. So I'll go into my user profile, and for the sake of the demo itself, I'll make myself HRVP and also make myself the manager. So I actually can show you what the approval request looks like.
Got it. This just feels like anarchy. But I was just going to say, so I also noticed when you were showing the error log, so there's the auto retry. So the idea is that there is the retry mechanism built in to, even when the workflow fails,
Yeah.
it retries multiple times, but then you can choose to retry it manually.
Actually, I don't think I can set myself as my HRBP.
Ah,
So we'll just set it to Alex at this point.
who is probably fast asleep and is going to wonder why he's suddenly handling your HR details.
Yes. It's okay. We'll go back into the request itself,
Mhm.
go into the logs, and now say retry. So it says retry initiated successfully. We can just refresh and look at the activities.
So just to clarify, it is retrying from this point in the
Yes.
workflow, right? It is not going to run through the entire workflow.
Okay. So if you notice, the next activity itself is
Mhm.
that approval request was sent to Aparna and Alex Tran, because
Mhm.
Aparna was the manager and Alex, like we saw, was my new HRVP.
Right.
We should also see an action for the send for approval itself.
Mhm.
I'll tell you that it was manually retried. This was the first attempt of retry. Uh, you can retry up to 10 times,
Okay.
uh, but I think beyond 10 times we block it because we feel like something's really wrong. If even after manual retries it fails after 10 times. But in this case, it says send for approvals in progress because approvals are pending.
Mhm.
That I'll cancel the approvals request. I didn't want them to get notified and approved. But
Got
yeah,
it.
that's how the actions work. You can either have something continue on failure, where you can say this is a step I don't really care about. If it runs, it runs. If it doesn't, it's okay. Or you can make it explicitly fail. And in cases where it explicitly fails, you can actually go and retry the action.
Got
Another
it.
thing, if you noticed, is like once I've retried, if I go back to the previous action, the retry button is not there anymore because I've already done the retry. We don't want people to run the same thing over and over again because that can have uh, unintended side effects.
Right.
So yeah, we block that as well. Yeah, so that's about it. I think there was a lot more to cover, but hopefully you've gotten uh, enough about
Yes,
the work.
I think enough and more, Akshay. And I want to, even before we close off, and we'll wait to see if there are any more questions come in. But I do want to say thank you so much for taking the time you've and for taking the effort to sort of come up with the use cases and really show us how it works, what it looks like practically. This has been very, very useful. I think just to see how the system works and sort of really the extent to which you can automate with workflows, right? Um, I think, like you said, there's so much more that we can do and so much more to come. I think maybe at some point we will schedule a session two of this. We'll give you a little bit of a break though, because I'm sure that was quite the trial by fire. I think
So it is okay.
so. Just a couple of questions. One is, are there any sort of system-wide or tenant-level limits on the number of workflows or the number of steps per workflow or the frequency of scheduled workflows? Like, do we cap for any of those?
We don't cap in terms of how many you can create.
Mm-hmm.
What we do, it's not really a cap. What we do is we start rate limiting the scheduled workflows
Okay.
after a certain point. So there are tenant level limits on how many scheduled workflows can run at a time, and this primarily to prevent from your tenant going down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that we'll block them, but we might slow down how many workflows we run, especially scheduled workflows. If a lot of them get bunched up,
Mm-hmm.
it can lead to failure. So what we do is we slow them down a little bit. So instead of running like 10 at a time, we'll probably do 5 at a time. And once the backlog is cleared, we'll again bring it back up.
Got it.
But no one should ever hit that limit. That happens generally when like at a given instant you are like 5,000 scheduled workflows to run.
Mm-hmm.
In which case we just say, okay, let's slow it down. Let's run it 100 at a time.
Got it.
So the worst thing that can happen is there'll be a small delay of a few minutes
Mm-hmm.
in your workflow executing. So I guess
Got
if running at 745, it'll run at 750. But beyond that, there's no real limits.
Got it. Yes. I think the one other question, which and maybe we can have a separate session on this, was about workflows on change records, which I think in itself is a whole other ball game, right? Because
Yeah.
change is, yeah. So we'll thank you for that question. We'll think about having a session where we run a deep dive into change workflows itself.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think there are any other questions. Before we sort of end for the day, just a couple of things. One, any if there was one best practice that you think that admin should keep in mind when creating workflows, what would you say it is?
I would say even though with Atom we're now removing the step of figure out a plan, but I think one thing to think about is always be clear on what the automation you want is, because at least even to Atom you have to tell it exactly what you need.
Mhm.
Uh, I think that's the biggest step. If you're clear on what automation you want to do, that's like half the battle won.
Got it.
Uh,
And I think the other question, and this is just a fun one, is what is the either the most interesting or the strangest use case you've seen that's been automated? Like, you know.
yeah. Uh, we've set this up ourselves for our tenant. So
Mhm.
we have an integration with Zoom, and we have an action within Zoom which says, actually, I can just show you those actions. So there's an action within Zoom that allows you to get a recording transcript of a meeting.
Mhm.
So we then pass it to a AI classifier. Actually, okay, Zoom is not enabled on this account, but if it was, there's an action to get a recording of a meeting. We
Mhm.
then pass it to a classifier and then ask it, could this meeting have been an email?
I knew where you were going, and I was it
And
was
then
more.
it sends an email to all the participants of that meeting saying this could have been an email.
That is, yeah, that is really funny. I hope it's, yeah, I we do see that happen in office,
Yeah.
and I hope other people will take a leaf out of our book and implement it, because some meetings really should be emails. And I think this one is, if we've reached a limit where people are going to be saying that about this, because we are at 1.5 hours. This has been very extensive, Akshay. Thank you so much. We will come back to you and to the audience and to anyone who watches later. If you have any questions, please do feel free to get in touch with us. We'll be happy to run you through this, run you through a demo of Atomic Work, see if Atomic Work works for your teams, for your organization. And yes, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Akshay. See you next
Thank
time.
you. Yep.